Well, hello and welcome everyone to our special sprint presentation featuring research from the Complexity Theories in Education SIG's Mentorship Sprint Program. My name is Joey Eisman and I'm a doctoral student at Temple University and the graduate student representative for the Complexity Theories in Education SIG. The purpose of our SIG is to apply, advance, and extend the complexity theories in inquiry, research, theory, and practice in a variety of educational contexts. And our speaker tonight is a former Sprint mentee of Dr. Avi Kaplan, is Hande, a third-year doctoral student and graduate research assistant in the educational psychology program in the School of Education at Virginia Tech. Her research interests include motivation, engagement, motivational climate, and complexity theories in education with a focus on complex dynamic and adaptive systems. She investigates motivational climates as a complex dynamic system, and she is also a researcher in the Music Model of Motivation Research Lab. Hande will deliver a presentation with an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. Please join me in welcoming Hande.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Let me see if I'll be able to share my screen. Okay. Can you see it? Okay. Yes, hello. I'm Hande, and I'm incredibly excited about sharing with you my research and my experience in this mentorship program offered by the Complexity SIG. As Joey noted, I'm a third-year PhD student in the educational psychology program at Virginia Tech. And I study motivation, engagement, motivational climate using the music model of motivation and complex dynamic systems frameworks. The complexity theories in education SIG started this mentoring program in January 2023, and it lasted 12 weeks. During those 12 weeks, mentors and mentees would meet 3 times synchronously, and then this research in progress and what emerged from this mentorship would be presented as a poster at the ARA meeting in Chicago. So this was an amazing opportunity for me because I've been studying and trying to understand complex dynamic systems for almost 3 years now, reading all the papers and books I can find, attending all the webinars, but I still had so many questions that I was utterly frustrated because in theory, everything makes sense, but when it comes to application and my research, I just didn't know what to do. And you will see what I mean by this when you see the data I had. So I applied for the program and I was matched with Professor Avi Kaplan, and I was like, yay, because I had read all his papers. I admire all his work, and he's one of the scholars I really look up to in educational psychology. And this is my poster I presented at the ARA last year. I will walk you through all of these sections one by one. But I should note that I did not keep working on this project after the ARA meeting because I promise I will explain, and for me it's so exciting. What I was mainly interested was to understand how to analyze large data set on students' perceptions of motivational climate without reduction or aggregation. My main question that I was struggling with was, how do we use a complexity lens when our data are large, ranging from hundreds to thousands of students, let's say? And here is my data. So it is a computer science introductory course. We had 3 sections of the same course with a total of 212 students. We surveyed students at 4 time points in weeks 5, 8, 12, and 15. Section 1 was a hybrid course with 113 students. Section 2 was also a hybrid course with 78 students. And section 3 was an online course with 21 students. So overall, I just didn't know how I could analyze this data using complex dynamic systems perspective, because as I said, I had too many concerns about so many things, such as reduction or aggregation. And because I wanted to investigate the motivational climate at a macro collective level instead of individuals at a micro level, so I had no idea how to do that without reducing the motivational climate system to its components or aggregating the results way too much that it becomes meaningless. So as my theoretical framework, I wanted to use the music model of motivation, not because my advisor, dear Professor Jones, developed it, but because the model integrates the 5 cross-theoretical psychological indicators into a system of interdependent components of the motivational climate. So in the music model, empowerment refers to the autonomy students believe that they have in a course. Students feel empowered by having the ability to make decisions about their learning and feel that they have some agency in their learning. And usefulness is related to the utility value. That is, students understand why what they are learning is useful for their long and short-term goals. And success component is related to students' success expectancies. We want to understand the extent to which students believe they can succeed in a course if they put forth the effort. Interest refers to situational interest, and we assess if students are interested in and enjoy the content and instructional activities. And finally, caring refers to whether students believe that the instructor and their peers in the learning environment care about them as a person. We are able to assess each student's these 5 key psychological perceptions of the motivational climate in a course, although many other internal and external variables are included in the larger music model. But overall, we are focusing on those 5 perceptions because we consider that the interactions of those 5 perceptions are essential to infer and interpret a motivational climate systemic state. During our meetings with Professor Kaplan, a lot of answers and questions emerged. The first question that emerged was the issue of unit of analysis. What is the unit of analysis in the study? And Professor Kaplan kept asking me, what is it that you're trying to find out? What is the unit of analysis? Because any level of the system, it could be individual students, a group of students, or the collective class can be a legitimate foregrounded unit of analysis. And the system's behavior manifests differently at different units of analysis. And also, it's not possible to capture the entirety of the system. So we have to foreground the unit of analysis we're interested in and background the others. So for this study, for motivational climate system, we chose to foreground the collective class section level and students' perceptions of 5 motivational climate indicators collectively at a macro level. And the second question or second challenge that emerged was what indicators best capture motivational climate? Because when I looked at the studies on motivation or motivational climate, for example, only situational interest or individual interest are assumed to be the indicators of the motivational climate, or it's only utility value or only belonging, etc. I am personally a little more inclined to the models or theories as inclusive of many theories as possible in order to capture more about the motivational climate in a course. So in this study, we used the music model of motivation and its 5 key indicators of the motivational climate, which are empowerment, usefulness, success, interest, and caring. And the third question that emerged in our discussions was how to integrate diverse motivational climate indicators into a coherent system. This is honestly one of the biggest questions of my PhD journey right now. Do I know the answer? Not exactly. Are we working on it? Yes. Are we going to find an answer? Yes, absolutely. But I guess the answer will emerge from this community who are interested in and collaborate on such difficult questions, I believe. And here's our fourth challenge. Because of systems characteristic of dynamic stability, behaviors manifest both stable and malleable patterns. And how can we best capture and represent motivational climate systemic change? And in this study, we try to find the patterns of stability and change. And here you can see the results and some observed patterns. We represent the state of motivational climate system with the combination of means, kurtosis, and standard deviation for each section. So the first row is section 1. Here is the mean values of section 1, kurtosis, and standard deviation. The second row is section 2 with means, kurtosis, and standard deviation values. And the third row is again section 3 with means, kurtosis, and standard deviation. One thing that I learned is that sometimes aggregation is inevitable and it doesn't have to be as scary as it looks. Here, we are aggregating the responses of multiple individuals to build a picture of the collective motivational climate system, because this picture provides useful insights into how students perceive the motivational climate in a course. And the point is that we need to analyze and present the data as clearly as possible and show the data from different angles. For example, instead of showing only the means, we also look at the kurtosis values, the standard deviation, and trying to understand and interpret what these data mean with the support of qualitative data like conducting interviews, student reflections, etc. Our surveys used a Likert scale from 1 to 6, 1 being completely disagree, to 6 being completely agree. The minimum value in those graphs you see is 4 because we didn't receive any values lower than 4. So what you see here is 4 being somewhat agree, 5 being agree, and 6 completely agree for each of the 5 music components at each time point, like here, week 5, week 8, week 12, and week 15. And the music components in graphs are color-coded. Yellow lines are usefulness, and purple lines are success. Caring is blue. Empowerment is red, and the green lines are interest. As I mentioned earlier, we just tried to observe the patterns, and the patterns we observed were, and in each section, mean values, as you can see, the mean values range from 4 to 6, and mean values were fairly stable over time because the results again ranged from between 4 to 6, and the relative order of the music means was similar across sections, with caring, usefulness, and success with the highest means, and empowerment and interest with the lowest across measurements. The patterns of variation are different across the sections. Section 1 has consistently the least variation, and section 2 has variation consistently higher, while section 3's variation varies over time from very variable to less variable, interestingly towards the end of semester. For me, these standard deviation results were interesting because The most crowded section had the consistently least variation, whereas the section with 21 students here, section 3, varied significantly over time. And standard deviation values tended to be highest for interest and lowest for caring. And also kurtosis values varied across sections and weeks. The values were highest here, which was 7.7 for usefulness in section 1. And there was no discernible pattern in the relationships between kurtosis and standard deviation within a section. I think having such picture and information is important, especially for instructors teaching those courses, because by looking at this general picture of a large or a small course, we can gain some insight into how our students perceive the course. Because when we can identify the lower values, there are so many available strategies for us to implement in order to improve those perceptions, or in other words, to perturb the system that is in an attractor state that is undesirable to us. And here is our further questions to explore. The number of questions we can ask is endless, and we just tried to put some of them on our poster. The first question was, how do we integrate the various indicators into a comprehensive understanding of the motivational climate system and its change over time? And two, how often should data be collected, and how to determine time points? Because there are studies that are conducted in seconds, a day, weeks, months, or throughout a semester. So how often should the data be collected? And the third question, what are meaningful control parameters to theorize? And the last question, how does the emergence of system behavior change when the unit of analysis changes? For example, how does motivational climate look when our unit of analysis is certain gender groups, or racial or ethnicity groups, or students with and without prior high school computer science experience? In fact, these further questions that emerged in this study are the reason why my focus shifted from this study to something else. And the aftermath of the ARA meeting in Chicago, starting from the beginning of this mentorship program to the last day of the ARA, it's been it was such an incredible and eye-opening experience for me. During the meeting, I met all the scholars whose theoretical and research papers I had been reading for a very long time. And I might have been a little starstruck. And I had a chance to talk to them, ask tons of questions to them. And they were incredibly patient and helpful, and they did their very best to help a perplexed PhD student. And at the end of this project, I just knew what specific questions to ask. And I think that's the most important thing that I took away from this program. And in Chicago, thanks to this experience, I just figured out what I wanted to do for my dissertation. And I just figured out what puzzles I wanted to solve and what questions I wanted to answer. So as a result, right now, I am writing a theoretical paper on motivational climate as a complex dynamic system. I'm working on that paper, and I've been thinking about it a lot. And this study will be a second paper to show the points I want to make in the theoretical paper. And thank you, and very special thanks to Professor Avi Kaplan for mentoring me, for his patience, and for his time. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Hande, and really appreciate all the research that you're sharing and the kind words that you're sharing, the gratitude that you're sharing. We're now going to move into the question and answer session or section of this conversation. If you have a question you want to ask, you can either put in the chat, take yourself off mute, but I'll get started. I just want to ask, based on what you just told us, that something we could do is to perturb the system, to change maybe where we are seeing these lower aspects of the motivation constructs. We want to see the higher ones. I'm just curious, how? What would you do? How would you recommend we perturb the system in this class?
You mean a class in which all the values are lower, for example, or the values that are lower for specific constructs? I mean, if we identify that, for example, usefulness is lower within a section, there are certain strategies to implement in order to increase those perceptions. Like instructor can try to explain why the course can be useful, or can ask students to reflect on why the course might be useful for them or for their future, or bringing guest speakers. There are many strategies to be able to increase those perceptions.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Gardner just put a question in the chat. She asks, were you able to map the values to class components / activities in the study you presented, or could you do this in the future?
Sorry, let me understand the question. Were you able to map the values to class components? Yes, not in this study, but now we are working on it. We are trying to connect those values to what is going on in the course, assessments, what type of activities. We're trying to keep a track of the things that we're doing in the course, and we are right now collecting data every week, and we are keeping a record of everything what is being done in those weeks. And I think this will give us a bigger and better picture to understand. So step by step, we're taking one step at a time, but we're working.
One comment or insight that I was thinking about when you were talking about the standard deviation and the kurtosis, particularly the standard deviation, how it changed for the third section, which was online. It just raised the possibility that agreement among students about the motivational climate, that when it shrinks, I mean, it takes time when people interact with each other, but it may be when people come in online, there's less a possibility for a shared experience because people are in their homes and what they see is just a screen. And I wonder about that control parameter of the classroom. Like it's such a powerful control parameter of the course.
Yeah. So when we were working on this data, we had certain control parameters: instructors' gender, instructors' expertise, section size, instruction modality, online, hybrid, face-to-face was one of them, and also ethnic, racial background, and student composition. So these are some, and the target aspects of the course being taught. So these are the main control parameters for now that we need to consider. I'm guessing there are more. We'll figure it out.
If I could just add on to that, Avi, that about 10 or 15 years ago, we started to ask students in online courses about the music perceptions, and we found that caring tended to be high. And so then we did another study, and we said, how can it be high? You don't even, this was a course with 700 students, one instructor. And so we tried to find out, and a lot of them didn't have expectations for it to be caring. And so I'm wondering, going to your point, that there may be variation, because some people might come in and say, well, I don't expect this to be caring. The fact that I get a few emails, yeah, this is really caring. And other people might say, this is terrible. I wanted the online section. And so that might explain some of that variation in terms of their schemas and their expectations coming in as to what they expect an online course to be. Whereas, like you said, the face-to-face one, it's probably narrower, and we're talking to students and we're there. So absolutely, that'd be it's one thing to explore even more, maybe. So.
And I think that's why now we are considering to collect more qualitative data, to interview students, to understand and to gain more insight into their perceptions. So we are also working on collecting more qualitative data. And I joined your DSMRI meeting, and there you talked about triangulation in data collection. That really helped me understand how to do this interpretation and data collection.
I have kind of a follow-up question to that. So Hande, this is great. And when I saw your graphs with your mean and your kurtosis and your standard deviation, what it sparked in me was a question about whether you can integrate those three measures somehow and interpolate between time points to produce a visualization of the attractor space that your class is moving through over time. If you read complex systems literature, oftentimes there will be a representation, whether it's conceptual or empirical, of a space through which the group or the individual is moving. So I'm wondering, even if you don't have that right now empirically, like, what do you wonder about what that could look like?
I don't know if it would be social network analysis, if I can achieve that with social network analysis. I'm not sure. I'm still exploring what I can do, and I'm extremely open to any kind of suggestions, because that's one of the things that we've been thinking pretty hard. And how to visualize it, how to show this attractor basin. How do we show, deep attractor states or weak how do we show the perturbations or repeller states? So how do we visualize this? So again, one step at a time, we will figure it out. But right now, I just don't know. But hopefully we will find an answer.
That's fair enough. That's just all I was wondering when I was looking at your graphs was, wow, I wonder what's going on in between and in relation to those measures that you have and in relation to the class activities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hande, I had a quick question. Thanks for presenting. I'm curious about the sprint process itself. Like, I guess this was an existing data set you already had. I may have missed that, but like, how was the process of reframing your current work into like a complexity theories mindset? Like what shifts did you have to make in your thinking about the problem? I'm curious, like how in depth was the redesign, if that's the process you went through?
I couldn't hear all of the question because I froze. But I think you asked how my understanding shifted when I started analyzing the data. Was that the question?
Right, yeah. I guess I didn't know if you already had like your research questions formulated prior, or if you just had data and then you designed from there. I didn't know if you redesigned the project or started from scratch.
Yeah, the thing is, when I read complex dynamic systems theory, when I read the articles, everything makes sense. And I was curious about the interactions between music components, in particular. I felt that I should be able to do that using the complex dynamic systems perspective. Yes, I had the data set. I felt that I have to use complex dynamic systems perspective, but I just didn't know how. And I was extremely worried because, when I read the papers, when I attend the webinars, everybody's talking about reduction, aggregation, and I was like, how do I do it? I have a data set of 212 students now, and new data sets are coming from thousands of students. How do we do that? So Dr. Kaplan gave me a lot of relief. Aggregation is inevitable, but show your data from different angles, analyze it from different angles. Don't show only the means, show other things as well, so that it becomes meaningful and nonlinear and not restricting.
That's really helpful for me to know. Thank you.
If I just also may, for those people who are either on the call or are watching this on our YouTube page later, if those who are interested in the program, people can come with pre-existing data sets or just theoretical questions or request to use data sets from other people. So you don't have to come with a pre-existing data set to participate in the project. Just want to clarify that for anyone who's watching. Are there any other questions for Hande? This is rich. I really love this conversation.
Just a follow-up on the previous line of thought around reference points. That, I mean, when we talk about motivational climate, there's a system of the physical, cultural, and personal and interpersonal processes that give rise to our conception and our experience of a climate. And one thought that I had, and this is based on some challenges that we had with trying to improve climate, is that the same behaviors you said, Brett and Hande, you emphasized, when people come with no expectations, then even like a gesture can be perceived, oh, this is wonderful. And when people come with a lot of expectations, then even if supposedly the environment is supportive, but it doesn't stand to the expectations, they feel frustrated and despondent. So I recall I advised two groups of school psychologists who were doing a needs assessment in two schools, and both of them came back and said students report that there's a violence problem, the perceived violence in the school. And I said, describe what's happening. And in one school, there was actually serious violence. People were kids were bringing knives. Both of them were middle schools. And there was a story of like a kids like grabbing another kid and throwing them through a window. It was really terrible. And in the other school, the students in the rating said, yes, violence is an issue. And then they went and interviewed, and the kids said, yes, there are some kids here who use bad words. And and I said, well, one of the intervention could be like to take the kids in one school to the other school to see what's going on and to calibrate. So I wonder about perturbing the system can happen in very different ways, and not the same concrete intervention will necessarily have the same effects. People who come to a psychology counseling course can have a very high expectation, and so who are we comparing, and how do we actually target the meaning-making system, which is what it is, of the collective? And that sends me back to John Nichols, who said basically what we need to do is have conversations with the kids, because the kids are theorists of their classrooms, even if it's not formal theories. And what we need, the perturbation is, let's talk about our expectations. Let's talk about the intention of the instructor. Let's talk about what will make you feel that I'm caring for you. And it's not like concrete intervention, and then we, use randomized control trial and say, now apply everywhere.
And we during our meetings, we also talked about the high contextual nature of complex dynamic systems. And after those discussions, now we started talking about incorporating. Dr. Kaplan, you will like when you see what we're working on. I'm pretty sure you will love it. I know there is a lot to improve, but I'm so excited about it. So incorporating the contextual aspect, because we can't separate. It's the learning doesn't happen in a vacuum, and this context will not always reflect what happens in other parts of the world. It's highly contextual. That's why Dr. Kaplan said, I mean, those studies must be case studies, because one thing that happens in this context, in this classroom, will not be the same as what happens in the other part of the world, in another major, in another, I don't know, so many variables that are dependent on the context. So we are seriously considering the role that context plays in motivational climate. We can't separate them.
Hande, I'm curious if you're willing to share, do you have any preliminary approaches on like how you would actually show that? Like, you know, like I'm always used to context being like just written in a paragraph in a study, and it just, this is the context. I'm curious to see if you had another way that you were thinking of kind of showing that.
It's in like, I mean, we are looking at levels because complex dynamic systems are hierarchical, right? And there are different levels to it. For me, there is a larger context, which is like the education policies of a country. Which country? Is it a country where lots of political issues occur, or is it a war zone? These are all the determinants, and these are all the things that interact with the motivational climate in the lower levels. And then there are other contexts within this context. And then we slowly come down to individual, because the thing is, individual is a complex dynamic system too. I've been reading studies right now. For example, they are studying self-esteem as a complex dynamic system, or depression as a complex dynamic system. So an individual or feelings of individuals can be also complex dynamic systems. So there are different hierarchical levels. That's all I can say for the moment. I'm working on it.
That I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense, because I guess levels of unit analysis, so levels of context too. And I've never thought of it that way. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and which unit of analysis do we want to focus on? What is it that we are trying to find out? And I also read that select the unit of analysis where there is a lot of variation, because some I don't know if it was Professor Kaplan's. I can't remember where I read that, but I mean, some courses are, all the perceptions are high. There is no variation. Everything seems to be fine, but in some sections, there's a lot of variation. So there is something going on. So let's look at that part of the system and select this part as the unit of analysis and see what's going on there. Let's see if there are any patterns that we can observe to understand the reasons behind this variation. So unit of analysis is, extremely important. That's one of the things that I learned in this mentorship program from Dr. Kaplan. It's extremely important.
Are there any final questions? Well, first, thank you all for a rich conversation, rich discussion. Thank you, Hande, for presenting your research and for discussing everything you've learned. I'm very excited personally to see how you're conceptualizing the music model as a complex dynamic system. I can't wait to see that paper come out. So I'm
Thank
gonna
you
now
for
share the
having
screen.
me.
No, thank you,
Thank-
thank you. So thank you again for joining us, for joining me and Hande for this rich presentation. The Sprint Mentorship Program is currently open and accepting applications for mentors and mentees. And the goal of the program is really to foster collaboration, innovation, and complexity-informed educational research. And we are beginning the program in January 2024, and it will ultimately, just like Hande was talking about, culminate in a work-in-progress style poster presentation during our SIG programming at the annual meeting of ARA in Philadelphia this year in April of 2024. And graduate students who are members of the SIG are eligible to participate as mentees, and we encourage the participation of faculty members who have expertise in complexity theories or complexity-informed qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods approaches. So we encourage you to either apply or to please share this information with interested colleagues or students. Thank you all very much for coming today. Really appreciate, and thank you again, Hande, for your presentation. Have a great night to everyone.
Excellent work. Thank you, Hande, very much.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. That was great.